When it comes to investing in leadership and culture development, what
Hmm.
criteria do you consider when determining the value of training?
Well, that's a good one. What criteria do I consider? I think it's the current climate. Um, I think it's something that's needed by every organization, but the current climate of where you are now would determine how much is invested. So I think the best organizations, when they have a good cadence of, okay, there's professional development to make sure that our culture stays the same, um, and it's across the board, is good, versus when you're only calling me when you got popped with something because you see that you're bleeding people. Like, it's really bad.
Mm-hmm. Whether you want a Band-Aid or whether you just say, let's maintain our organizational health the way people should maintain their physical and mental health.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And my preference, even when I'm called into an organization, um, because they're bleeding, or
Mm-hmm.
their turnover rate is over 100%, I'm still willing to go in because you're calling me in to talk to you. Um, I'm still willing to go in and hear you out at that point because I want to know, do you really want to fix it, or do you feel or are you getting pressure from someone else to just come in and tell us what we need to do? So is it the Band-Aid, or are
Mm-hmm.
you looking for triage to really create something that is not going to happen overnight? It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be this quick, Kathy, go tell them to do what I said do. Like,
Yeah.
that's not, go tell them I'm the boss. No, that's not how this works.
Right. And that's just going to bleed more people. I mean, that's
Yes.
it. It's right. Are you doing this as a gesture or to placate somebody, some stakeholder, and don't actually mean it?
Right.
And it's what Amazon does. That's why it dominates the world in sales, right? It's like, if you're not
That's it.
happy, send it back and we'll refund your money.
That's, as you were talking, Amazon was the first company that came to mind because of that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
why you have zero problems paying that, what, 12, $15 for the Prime,
Mm-hmm.
simply because it's like, oh, well, I'm going to buy a blue one and a red one because I'm not sure which one I'm going to like until I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so simple to send one or both back. And that no hassle return is what keeps people connected. Going back to Marshall Goldsmith, like, he is one of my faves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I love his theory behind that, but it also lends to why you do that initial consult, because okay, this client is not for me. So it's, taking those strategic methods to say, okay, this person is not where they need to be yet, but I can see how there is hope. I
Mm-hmm.
can see how, because of my strategic methods, that I can help them, versus the one that is closed off. So there's a discernment that happens in that process as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Marshall has a program that he offers, and one of his clients, her name is Dr. Tasha Urich, and she wrote a book
I know
called
Tasha.
Do You? I
I do.
love her. I use all of her material from Bankable Leadership and from Insight, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I met her through, there was a sort of randomly, I got connected with a New York based, I'm in Japan, but I
Okay.
got connected very randomly. I don't even know how, with a New York based sort of business brainstorming, group during COVID. And she was one of the members there. So I don't know
Mhm.
her well, but I know her fairly well. And she's in my feed. I see her posts and, comment, sometimes agreeing, sometimes disagreeing, because again, that's what makes us better. I don't have to agree with you. I don't care what your credentials are. If I disagree and I have credible reasons to do so, that's one of those
Mhm.
genius things that Ray Dalio talks about. It is like, you're contractually obligated to disagree with me if you have a good reason to do so, credible reason to do so, and you may be fired if you refuse to disagree with me when you had expertise or knowledge that would have helped us make a better decision. I love that, even though it's a
It's
pretty hard line. It's literally, I'm going to force you to disagree with me if you actually disagree with me and have good reason to do so.
Now that's psychological safety, right? At its
Mm-hmm.
finest. That
Yeah, it sure
I
is.
know, not sure I can have this conversation with you and not feel like I'm going to get fired. In fact, I'm going to get fired if I don't share.
Yes. And it's
So,
interesting because, of course, yeah, literally, it makes the risk not doing what you would do in the ultimate psychologically safe workplace.
yep,
So yeah, I've been a fan of his for a long time. And I
nice.
don't hesitate to pretend I work for him, or he's retired now, but I don't
Mhm.
hesitate to pretend to work for him when he says something about neuroscience, most of which is almost always on point. But I can think of
Mhm.
one particular time where I said, Ray, this is kind of, you went past your knowledge of neuroscience. I won't tell you about finance and hedge funds. You're wrong here. I never got a response back, but I didn't hesitate to tell him he was wrong and why he was wrong. And it's like, if you can't get it from a random person who actually knows more than you, exactly what you've said, then you
Mhm.
didn't really mean it at your work. And,
Mm,
I have no reason to doubt that he does. But it was interesting. It's like, I feel safe to tell this
right,
world-renowned expert why
right.
he's wrong and why he's wrong, because I know something he doesn't. So I
I
thought that
love
was pretty awesome. Can you share your thoughts on the frequency of coaching sessions, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? What would be sort of the best with the needs of yourself or your clients in terms of the kind of training we're talking about?
Sure. So this is another one of those, it depends.
Mm-hmm.
But the best cadence for me is biweekly because I want to have this conversation with you and I want us to talk through some things and give you time to pause and reflect. So biweekly is typically best. But I am absolutely open to monthly, but not past monthly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's either we're meeting twice a month or once a month at
Right.
best. And even when we're meeting once a month, there's check-ins via email or Voxer or some other kind of system that I'm using with that particular client.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. Anything less than, in fact, I'm a little more radical than you about this, and that is, anything less than a month is just ridiculous. You're not serious, and we're wasting one another's time.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say for virtually anything, it's like, if we're not meeting weekly, I promise you, you are getting much less results, because I literally have a document that I open every time I meet a new student. And I
Mm-hmm.
would tell basically the same thing to any client too. And that is, frequency is more powerful than duration. Ideally, in a perfect world, we should meet every day. If it was for 5 minutes or 15 minutes, would be far better than us meeting once a week for 6 hours. As soon as you go twice weekly, it now compromises that cycle, because we don't really think in twice weekly, or sorry, twice monthly, the same way we think once a month, the first Wednesday of the month. That's easy for our brains. When you start
Okay.
thinking 2 weeks, it's more likely, at least in my opinion, to cause a habit breaking dynamic. So weekly or monthly versus bi-monthly is like, bi-monthly when? Which weeks of the 5 weeks or 4 weeks? Among other things. Anyway, so
That's a different perspective. Because I think most of the things that I do personally are probably, and it goes back to how do you train your brain? What is the cadence
mhm.
that you're used to?
Hmm.
And I think that most of the things I do are typically on a bi-weekly basis. And so hearing you explain these things makes it, maybe that's why I have this system, because a lot of things that I do in my life are based on bi-monthly or bi-weekly, depends on how you want to call it,
Hmm.
on system, on a system. So I'm just sticking with the cadence that I'm used to following for most
Hmm.
stuff.
Well, and it works. Like, I mean, even if we were to say, okay, let's make a test of this and find out
Mhm.
which is true, it also doesn't matter if A, that works for you and that works better for you, and maybe you find um, once a week for you is habit breaking. So I'm working, of course, I'm working from my own biased individual perspective,